So now let's turn to today's session. We're going to kick off day three with Alessandro Agnello, who is the CEO and founder of True Data Ops, a company that makes building operations easier by using technologies like AI, predictive maintenance, and real-time analytics. Alessandro is a US Air Force veteran who enjoys mentoring other veterans, and he has a PhD in computer science and holds 12 patents for inventions in various fields, including AI, facility management, and medical, uh, including technology that was featured in a Microsoft commercial. So, Alessandro, welcome to FM Tech Week 2025. Over to you. Really looking forward to listening to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Alessandro. I also go by Alex. I am a IFMA member also. I am actually part of the IFMA Boston chapter, and you may have seen my name across for some of these posts for other types of trainings and presentations I do. So if you're on the call and you know who I am, just wave and hello. So for the ones that don't know me, I'm a computer scientist playing in a mechanical engineering world. So it's really fun for me to communicate with you guys. I'm an engineer first, always thinking like an engineer. And I try to bring technologies that I've built and worked with to your environment. So with that, I always like to ask a poll question. So please, Christy, if you could please put up the poll. Thank you for that. And then when this closes, this will be good information. So the idea is if you could ask your building or buildings just one question, what would it be? Right? All right, I don't know how much longer that we need, but I'll just keep waiting. And then once we have those results, we'll go into kind of what is True Data Ops and all the different components and how we're a little bit more unique. Okay, looks like that has been completed. Which systems are at most of risk of failure is the number one answer by 42% out of the 26 people that participated. So thank you. That is going to be very helpful for the future. Okay, come on. Here we are. So this is a brief introduction of True Data Ops. We kind of started back in 2019 with work orders and asset management. When you see these little QR codes, they're just representing that we're QR code enabled, barcode enabled, and so on. And then as we started growing, we started listening to our customers and they said, hey, Alex, I've got these boilers from the 1960s. When they fail, I need to know about it because it's keeping me up at night. You know, they're not connected to a BMS system, or maybe sometimes they are, but in this scenario, it wasn't. Is there anything you can do for that? Of course. So we've developed some IoT hardware. So for some of the users that are on the call, I'm sure some of you don't have a BMS system, and that's okay with this type of technology. For the ones that do, you know, we can start pulling that kind of data in and start looking at it and analyzing it for you. And what we can do with it that makes it more unique is that when we start putting our predictive maintenance algorithms on top of it, rather it be for IoT or energy management or BMS, we can start looking at insights and doing, you know, start being able to tell you about things. With the recent additions that you guys have seen with like your chat GPTs, your co-pilots, your Geminis, your so on and so forth, that type of technology, the large language models, now allow us not to give you just an answer to say, go look at this, but actually give you a narrative. And with that, and us and ourselves actually building that type of technology ourselves, our own large language models, we came up, we trademarked, ask your building a question. So what we're doing is we're taking all these data sets that you typically have in different silos, if you will, and we combined it into one. And what we've done for an interface is you can do it on your phone, a tablet, your website, a web app, you know, so on your desktop, we can do it in all sorts of different ways for you to actually communicate and see this data. But we kind of wanted to say, before we really showed you the technology, be like, it's all of this data together. And I have another slide coming up that really hones in on that. But other things we can do is we can also look at your energy data. So this is like a really cool concept saying like, if you have BMS data, great. But if you have CTs for sub-metering, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it, that's where CTs really come into play with combination of BMS data. So as I said, I'm accustomed seeing them kind of siloed, but with us, we pull them together, looking at alarms that you describe or maybe our system determines, and then looking at your schedules, and then looking at outside temperature. And then if you have some other IoT sensors, maybe you're looking at differential pressures between air filters to say how much more energy usage is it compared to just say replacing the air filter. And with all that, you can actually start reducing your capital expenditure. So we can say, hey, these are your assets that are actually operating properly versus not, and you can compare them. So if you had, say, 4 air handlers that were all commissioned on the same day in the same model or so, now you can actually pick one and say, which one should I do, right? And these are some of these tools you guys have today. However, you have to kind of analyze that data for it, and thus, I was going to show the ask your billing question. Thus, you could actually start asking questions about it. This particular slide, I know it's a little bit off a tangent, but I do want to kind of show this to folks because it's really important to me. When we're looking at data, a lot of the times with the BMS systems, you just get an alert. And it says, hey, you just went over this value or under this value, or maybe you have some complex ladder logic, which is great. But what we're trying to say in addition is to say, sometimes you got to look at the values of it and say, am I working correctly within my operating mods? This is a pump that we're looking at for vibration analysis. We see these sawtooth kind of peaks and closes. That's telling me the pump turn on, pump turn off, pump turn on, pump turn off. That is an indicator in our system determined to say, hey, like this pump isn't operating correctly. Go service it or do something. Go get your eyes on it. And that's exactly what happened. This pump was 2 months old. And we, typically pumps are kind of going like this. We call it like surfing. They're going up and down to vibration values. They're not going up and down, up and down, up and down. Turned out to be an electrical failure with this pump. So with all this type of data and these other types of data points right here from your BMS, if you have it, your energy management, if you have it or not, you can always add it. IoT sensors, your work orders, asset management, other data sources. We kind of pull it all together into one silo where you can start asking your building a question. Now, this presentation, like this is it. Like we just have a live demo, then a Q&A. So right now, I'm going to show you guys what is it like to ask your building a question, because this is what you're here for. Okay, could someone just confirm with me that you are still seeing my screen? I've had issues before with Zoom. It should say ask your building a question.
You are up.
Thank you so much. So what are we viewing? We're actually viewing an instance of True Data Ops on a school, actually. I've just kind of hidden some of their information. And this organization has energy management, IoT sensors, BMS, work orders, asset management, you name it, they have it. They have everything with it. So I'm going to ask the question very similar to what you guys asked, like, what should I do? What system's going to fail? So I'm going to say, with my current alerts, what insights do you see? And insights, I would tell you guys, so if you could take anything walking away from this, if you guys are ever doing any data analysis with any large language model, your Copilot, your ChatGPT, I highly recommend the word insights, because now you're actually saying, you tell me what you see, because I'm not trying to direct you. I want you to figure it out. And it will try to do it based off its best practice. So I just hit submit. Takes about 10, 15 seconds, may take a little bit longer because I'm on a Zoom call right now. But what's happening is we're pulling, as of right now, not last week, not yesterday, right now, all the data related to IoT, BMS, energy management, you name it. It's all on here. And we got an answer. So we see P10, and that is the name of their asset. In this case, has over 5,000 alerts. But we can see here that there's a lot of alerts, but the average value is relatively low because this is in meters per second, but the duration is high. So what this tells me is that this alert in particular, if I was the facility manager, say, you should retune this alert. It's actually not working as much as you think it is. Then the secondary one was like P15A has 4 alerts. Okay, great. We can kind of go down the gambit here. Freezer temperature alerts. We can see that. And we see hot water boiler stuff. So these are things that maybe you guys have heard, maybe the first and second, but it may be the hot water boiler. You're not realizing that it's alerting. So that's going to bubble up over time. And that's kind of the idea here, right? Is that it's a tool. We're trying to show to you like what what are my alerts? What's going to happen? Failures. Here's some points of it. And this is great. These next tabs that I have opened, we're going to go through them. I've already pre-asked questions maybe 5 minutes before this discussion, just to kind of get the ball rolling where we're not waiting. Talking about pumps, I said, what pump should we look at individually? What should I be concerned about? Because maybe there's no alerts on it, right? Maybe I forgot to add an alert as a facility manager. And so it looked at all the pump vibration data that we had because we've tagged it with our asset management system. And it says, you should look at pump P13. And let me tell you why. And then here's the data that represents it with the values over the course of, the last few days here in this scenario, but we are pulling a heck of a lot more than that. This is just for visualization. So now I know where to go. So we asked the very high level question and it showed pumps at first. And then we said, okay, let's go ask about pumps. Which one should I be concerned about? And like, hey, wait a second, these other two had high alerts, but this one in particular, P13, is probably the one that's up and coming that I should really spend time to. So I want you to think about that, what just happened, right? Which one's going to fail? We got a high level. And then it gave some information based off the alerts. However, we scanned the sensor data and it individualized it to one to say, this is the one I should do a work order against or maybe preventive maintenance. And by the way, these are all things when everything is not siloed with our organization you could do. You can base it off runtime. You could base it off category to say, hey, we need to schedule preventive maintenance on this. Going to the next slide here. All of you are doing preventive maintenance, I'm sure of it, right? Everyone has a checklist. The question is, what are you doing with that data? Are you just using it just to say you've done it for records? Because I'll tell you right now, you're on a mountain of gold of data, an absolute mountain of gold. What we're doing is we've asked the basic question, take the last year worth of checklists and tell me what insights you see. As I said, that keyword insights, it's a really great word because I'm not telling it what to do. I'm asking it to give me a suggestion. And with this organization, it's a nonprofit. They actually do a lot of safety, cleanliness, parking lot checks. They have like 10 or 15 different checklists they use with our system. Like, what do we see? Because they've gone through their own personal checklists. And now, if you can imagine, we're going to analyze and give you a natural language answer to it. So the first one is fire safety equipment. We're seeing that fire extinguisher and panic alarms are largely in place and operational. However, there's a lot of issues with the fire pull stations indicating potential training and maintenance gaps. So what do you do with this information, right? Well, you go to your safety officer if you have one, or you just contact your staff. They have over a couple thousand employees, so they actually emailed their staff, their entire organization staff to say, hey, we're finding issues here because we're seeing blocked hallways and exits and so on. The asset director in this case wasn't aware of all these issues because they have a huge group of folks underneath them doing the work, but it doesn't always bubble up. With Ask Your Building a Question, it's right in front of them, right? There's no guessing. It's there. Kind of going down here, the cleanliness, we can see most reported locations are generally clean. However, we found some failures of doors functioning, opening, closed correctly. All right, great. What else do we see? We see cracks in glass across various locations. All right. So look, it's very kind of like, oh, I'm sitting on a mountain of data, and now you're turning it into something that I can understand and what to do with it. I know not everyone can see it, but I'm assuming, everyone's like, oh, this is interesting. I'm hoping for that. Next would be parking lot checks. You can see that. But here's the recurring stuff, right? Because we asked for insights. So it's going to give us other details that we didn't ask for, that we didn't realize. So here's the common issues. Doors not closing properly, broken ceiling tiles, general maintenance needs such as landscaping. These are issues that your checklist that you're doing, you're filling them out and saying all this stuff. We're bringing it to your attention now. Okay, going to something more interesting is let's take the last 15 months of work orders that are closed and what patterns exist. What are we seeing first? What is the most frequent issues? And then safety, electrical, so on. So air conditioning and heating problems. No one on this call is surprised with that answer. Not a single person. Everyone complains, I'm too hot, I'm too cold. It's the biggest. We've done analysis with all of our organizations. We said, what is the most common work order? It's HVAC, with people being too hot or too cold. No surprise there. And then for this organization, secondary, and by the way, this organization has 80 plus buildings on it to really kind of level out to tell you like there's a lot of data coming in here over the last 15 months. I think we've calculated about 15,000 work orders a month they're doing this organization. So it's a lot of data we're going through. That's why I like showing them because it's a lot. So plumbing issues, we're seeing a lot of people complaining about toilets and so on. And how are they communicating this, right? They're using True Data Ops, using our work order system. They're using their cell phones. They're using our QR code, scanning it, reporting issues, and we know exactly where it is. People with electrical issues and so on and so forth. So this next question is kind of interesting. We're going to go back to the work orders and we can see what these frequent issues are, but let's turn it around and say, I've got all this work of work orders. What else can I do with it for information, right? I need to hire someone. I want to hire another facility engineer. I asked, what type do you suggest to hire first, second, third, dot, dot, dot. Great. Now I can start answering to say what I should do because we're backing it with data, right? We just asked the building, in this scenario, the buildings, if I was going to hire another facility engineer to make you happy, which one should I hire first, second, or third, based upon all of the buildings that are correlated and organized together? Not surprised, based off the previous question we asked, an HVAC specialist. A lot of stuff like that. And then next would be an electrical engineer, then general maintenance, plumbing, and then facility safety officer. So now we're kind of getting an idea and a flow of where should we go. So as I said, your checklist is a mountain of data, and your work order and all your data is really, you're sitting on gold, but you want to be able to start asking it unique questions to make your life easier. The whole point is to direct you to where you want to go. The last one that I'm going to show here was actually really interesting. I was working in a different state. There was a manufacturer, and what we were working on was this concept of an SOP. And I said, it'd be really cool is, are you guys familiar with the Facebook Meta glasses, right? They're basically glasses that have a camera in it so we can do a recording. What we did was the following. I said, make a couple videos of that, of actually servicing this, the gas system. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to generate the SOP based on the video that you created. So think about that, because generating an SOP is a pain in the butt. No one likes to do it. And I said, wouldn't it be cool to use our system to generate an SOP and assign it, to the asset being the gas system and all that stuff. But just generate an SOP and get it emailed to you. So that's exactly what happened here. I'm showing the results of this right now. And it was about 3 videos, each of them, I think 2 minutes each, because of at the current time when we did this a couple months ago, that was the limitations. And look what it's produced. There's the purpose, the scope, the responsibilities. Here's the procedure, the purging of tanks, being specific on some of the tanks, what to look for, the system maintenance, so on and so forth. What I can tell you is that this is about, I would say, 80% accurate. That's what we got from there. So with 80% accuracy, guess what? It's a great boilerplate. I'm not saying this is going to replace it, but the idea to say that we could generate an SOP just based upon someone doing a few video recordings, because that's what they know best, and actually pointing at things and saying keywords like this is important, worked here. We did do some other transcribing to make sure that it did make sense. There was a lot of background noise because it was in a very, very loud environment. We measured the decibel, and our system was still able to take out the audio and transcribe it to English and then transform it because we told it was a gas system in addition. So it's pretty cool technology here. Use it to your advantage. So I know we got 10 minutes left, and I really wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to ask questions. So I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I see Ed, if you could help me kind of go through this, that would be fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. What a phenomenal presentation, and what really useful tool, I've got to say. So First question I've got is actually pretty personal to me, in that I've been working for many years trying to have conversations with buildings, and mostly when I'm sober. But the um, so first question is, given the challenges with older buildings, are AI-driven facilities only for new buildings? But can older buildings use this too? And if so, how?
Sure. So it's not for just new buildings, it's for any building, right? So let's break this down. If you have a BMS system, great. If it speaks BACnet, even better. If it doesn't, we've had plenty of scenarios where we've actually converted an older protocol into BACnet. We do it, fairly often actually, and we convert it to BACnet. So this way, A, it's not proprietary anymore. So other individuals and other groups like TDO can pull data from there. But if you do not have a BMS system, which is about 60% of buildings or so, I've found out recently, they we would suggest to do IoT sensors at that point. And then with the use of TDO, we do put an on-premises server we recommend. So if you have 100, 200, 500 sensors, they all go in as one. And then guess what? We actually make TDO with our server turns into a BACnet controller where you can pull those data points in addition. And then using our tool for TDO, you have the web app and the mobile app, you can actually see that data there. So yes, the answer is yes. Those the best example is that building that was commissioned that I talked about, that school from the 1960s. That data you saw, those pumps were really old. The boilers on them were built from 1967. They take oil type number 4. That's how old we're talking here. So as old as they can come. So it really doesn't matter because these were old relay systems that we've adapted to. So hopefully that answers your question, Ed.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Thank you. Which actually leads me on to the next piece. You mentioned putting sensors in, and but so sometimes we want to be able to control and what's going on. So that could lead in. What's the primary difference between what you've just shared with us and building automation? And don't we already have automation in some of those newer buildings? So why would we want to layer this on top?
Sure. So by definition, automation, like ladder logic, if you're familiar with those terms, or for the folks on the call here, those are taking a series of steps that are based off state. So whatever the current state is, if it matches that, then it goes down that path. The difference, what I've shown with our artificial intelligence is it's going to change its direction, if you will. It can go to a different state. It can go to a different place. And then that's where it has a learning perspective with it. It actually learns and it will make the adjustments on your behalf based off of previous behaviors. It's not based off, if I'm in this state, do this. And that's what automation is, right? Which is great for if you're manufacturing a product and you're trying to go down the step. But if you're trying to be in a learning environment where it's constantly evolving, this is where these types of AI systems are more unique. Hopefully I've answered that question because that's a deeper question. But baselining it, just to super simple terms, when you're working with the BAS system, it's following steps and it will not go to that next step unless that state is done. With these AI systems, it can go anywhere it wants. It's more of a free reign, open world.
Okay. And I'll finish off on that same theme, and then we'll switch gears a moment with some of the other audience questions. So given that it can actually interact with the systems, and I would expect it can probably do that without a human intervention. How how do we ensure that the human is in the loop, and how do we, and from that, how do we ensure that the system isn't hallucinating, and if it is hallucinating, we catch it before something happens?
Sure. Ed, first, I'm going to say thank you for using the word hallucination because that is actually a term that is used. So I do like that you used it. Secondarily, everything I showed you today was a tool, right? Did it? It made suggestions, but it didn't actually do anything on your behalf. With TDO, we're very much as an advisory, bolt on. We'd like to give advice to say the system is giving advice to say this is what you should do. And these are the reasons why, and providing all the data sets with it. I have personally seen other organizations do AI systems where I've seen it shut off a system by accident. We don't like to get into that. We like to stay at the monitoring phase because It's just to give involvement. So for our point of view, for our organization, it's all about using it as a tool to make your life easier. It's not a replacement, but it's just a tool. And we stress that a lot. It's a tool, it's a tool, it's a tool.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. So, got an interesting question that came in from the audience, which what are you doing for facilities management in the hotbed of biotech and biopharma in the Boston area and around startups specifically? So, Mirek Gorski came in with that question. So, thank you, Mirek. What are you up to in the Boston area?
Sure. So I live in the Boston area, as I kind of first mentioned, and uh, we're tapping onto a lot of their cold freezers, if you will. So there is ISO standards that we must follow. We're kind of behind the scenes with them, and what we're looking at is can we predict when a uh, freezer going to fail based upon the differences of how it's operating. So we look at energy consumption of them, and if we start seeing a lot of variability within them, depending on what time it is, because we do know when people are opening and closing things, and we're also looking at the temperature. And guess what? This type of information, we're pulling it from existing sensors. If we can pull it from something that's existing, we will. We don't want to duplicate it because adding another sensor doesn't solve a problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I think for the last question, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit more broadly. Um,
Sure.
Based upon your knowledge of FM, obviously you've got a really interesting perspective that I would say you have the outside in view of facilities management, given the background that you've got. From your knowledge of FM and your broader knowledge of computer science, AI, and the like, what do you think we should be looking out for next
You
in
know what
AI and buildings?
so what I would say I would actually like to see more structure, if you will. I would like to see more standards. Coming from the medical, working with the FDA, working with the DoD specifically, everything follows process with ISO standards, and BACnet is like the first case of that. I would like to see more of that standardization. And for the reason being, other organizations outside of myself could start working with other data sets to make them smarter because there's a lot of other organizations that we have to do these transformations with that take time and energy and effort. And we're trying to say, like, could we just normalize it? Could it be non-proprietary from the get-go? And there's plenty of organizations that are using hardware today, that allow that. And I'd love to see more of that and really the standardization of what data format should be. Because once it's standardized, then a lot more innovation will come out because now people will be able to solve more unique kind of crisp AI projects because it's very hard to say, hey, if someone says to you, hey, I have AI, it'll solve all your problems. That's not the case. You have to be very specialized in what you're looking at because we specialize in pumps and looking at that. And then we'll look at boilers and stuff like that. They're very different from each other. They operate different. And with the use of standards, that could help us normalize these. So that's what I would say is standardization. If that could happen, then innovation could really grow.
Great. I think that's a great answer to finish the session. And it speaks to me that if we could standardize all the effort that we spend today on normalizing data between different standards and the like, we could actually put that effort into innovating and taking the built environment forward. So, really, really great. Well, thank you, Alex. I think it's been a great way to kick off day 3 of FM Tech Week. Thank you to everybody in the audience who joined today, and see you a little bit later on.
Thank you.
Thanks for FM Tech Week.
Thank you.